At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law's mother looked at the calluses on my hands and announced to the whole reception, "Don't let the janitor touch the cake table. God knows what's been on those fingers." 210 people heard her. Half of them laughed. I set down my champagne glass, walked to the head table, and told my daughter I loved her. Then I left. The next morning, when the lawyer's office opened, his entire family learned exactly who the janitor was. My name is Russell, and for 31 years I cleaned floors. I want to be honest about that right up front, because the woman who insulted me built her whole opinion of me on it, and I think you ought to understand the things she was so sure made me beneath her. I started pushing a mop at 52 North Industrial when I was 19, the year after my own father passed, and left my mother with a mortgage and a bad hip. I never finished college. I worked nights so I could be home in the mornings, and later, after my wife got sick, so I could drive her to her appointments in the afternoons. I've wiped up things in office buildings that would turn your stomach. I have unclogged toilets for men who wouldn't hold the elevator for me. I made peace with all of it a long time ago, because the work fed my girl, and my girl was everything. Her name is Hannah. She came along when I was 26, and her mother, my Claudine, held on for 11 years before the cancer took her. After that, it was just the two of us in a little rented house on Delmar Avenue. And I'll tell you, I have never been prouder of anything than the woman that little girl became. She put herself through nursing school. She works the cardiac floor at Mercy General 12-hour shifts, holding the hands of people on the worst day of their lives. She is kind in the way that costs you something, the real kind. So when she brought home a young man named Trevor and told me she was in love, I was ready to love him too. I wanted to. I had been waiting 20 years for someone to look at my daughter the way she deserved to be looked at. Trevor seemed fine. A little smooth, maybe. He sold commercial insurance and wore the kind of watch I'd have to save 3 months to buy. But he was polite to me, and he made Hannah laugh, and that was the bar. The trouble was never really Trevor. The trouble was his mother. Her name was Bianca, and the first time I met her, at a dinner Hannah arranged at a steakhouse downtown, she shook my hand, glanced down at it, and let go a half-second too fast. I knew that half-second. I'd been getting that half-second my whole life. She asked me what I did, and when I told her, she gave me a smile that didn't reach anywhere near her eyes and said, "Oh, how honest!" Like honest was a polite word for something else. Bianca's late husband had owned a chain of car dealerships, and she carried herself like the money was a personality. She corrected the waiter twice. She mentioned her country club 3 times. When Hannah ordered the salmon, Bianca said, "Good girl, watching your figure before the dress fittings," and I watched my daughter's jaw tighten in a way that broke my heart, because I'd raised her to be too kind to fire back. I let it go that night. I let a lot of things go over the 18 months they dated because Hannah asked me to. "Please, Dad," she'd say, "it's Trevor I'm marrying, not her. Just smile and get through it." So I smiled. I smiled when Bianca asked in front of everyone at the engagement party whether I'd be comfortable at a venue that nice. I smiled when she suggested I rent a tux rather than wear my own suit because we want the photos to look a certain way. I smiled so much my face hurt, and I told myself it didn't matter because it was Hannah's day coming, not mine. I want to tell you about that suit, actually, because it matters later. It was my father's. Charcoal grey, a little out of fashion, but I'd had it taken in and pressed, and I'd been saving it for exactly this. The last time I'd worn it was Claudine's funeral, and before that, my own wedding. There was a lot of my life in that suit. When I put it on the morning of Hannah's wedding and looked in the mirror, I saw my father, and I saw the boy who'd married Claudine, and for a second I had to sit down on the edge of the bed because the missing came up so strong. I wished she could have seen our girl get married. I talked to her a little, the way I still do sometimes. Then I straightened my tie and drove to the church. The wedding itself was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. The venue was an old restored estate out in the wine country an hour north of the city, all stone and ivy and string lights, and Hannah came down that aisle on my arm, and I held her together right up until she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Dad." Then I lost it a little, and I didn't care who saw. The ceremony went off perfectly. The reception started fine. There was a band and good food and 210 guests because Bianca had insisted on inviting half her country club, and the wine was flowing. It happened during the cocktail hour, right before they were supposed to bring out the cake. I'd offered to help. That's the part that gets me, even now. The caterers were short a person, and the wedding planner was running around with a headset looking frazzled, and I am not the kind of man who can stand around holding a drink while other people work. So I rolled up my sleeves and started helping move the dessert table into position near the dance floor, the way I've moved 1,000 tables in 1,000 buildings. It's just what my hands know how to do. Bianca came around the corner with a glass of red wine and a cluster of her friends, those women with the stiff hair and the loud voices, and she stopped when she saw me. She looked at my hands on that table. She looked at the scars across my knuckles, the calluses, the thumbnail I lost to a loading dock 40 years ago that never grew back right. And she said it loud. She wanted it loud. "Oh my Lord, don't let the janitor touch the cake table. God knows what's been on those fingers." And then, to her friends with a little laugh, "I keep telling Trevor, you can dress up the help, but you can't take the gutter out of them. I've been insulted in my life. You don't push a broom for 3 decades without men in nicer clothes making you feel small." But I had never in my life heard anyone say something like that about me in a room where my daughter could hear it. And she did hear it. I watched it land on her face from across the room. The thing I'll never forget is the laughing. Not everyone, but enough. Bianca's friends, and a table of men near the bar, and somewhere a woman's bright high giggle that cut through everything. They laughed at me standing there in my dead father's suit with my hands on a table. I was only touching to help. I'm not a man who makes scenes. I want you to know that. I have spent my whole life swallowing things. But standing there, I thought about Claudine, and I thought about 31 years of night shifts, and I thought about the boy at 52 North Industrial, who never got to be anything else because he chose his family every single time. And something in me just went very quiet and very still. I took my hands off the table. I straightened up. I walked across the room, past Bianca, past all of them, and I went to my daughter. Her eyes were wet and furious, and she started to say something, and I just put my hand on her cheek and said, "This is your day, sweetheart. Don't you give them one more minute of it. I love you. I'm going to head home." "Dad, no." "It's all right," I said. "It's all right. You go dance with your husband." And I left. I drove the hour home with the windows down, and I didn't cry, which surprised me. I felt strangely calm, because somewhere on that dark highway, I remembered something I'd been carrying around for almost 2 years, and I realized that tomorrow, everything was going to be very different. Here's the part Bianca didn't know. Here's the part nobody at that wedding knew. My father, the one whose suit I was wearing, was a quiet man too. He drove a delivery truck. But his older brother, my uncle Wendell, never married, never had kids, and made a fortune nobody in our family talked about, because Wendell was the kind of man who thought talking about money was vulgar. He'd started buying up cheap land outside the city limits in the 60s, scrub lots nobody wanted, and he'd held on to every acre of it for 50 years while the city crept outward and swallowed it whole. Wendell and I were close, in the quiet way 2 private men can be. I used to drive out and fix his fences and clean his gutters on my days off, never asking for a dime, just sitting with him afterward, drinking coffee on his porch. He died 2 years before Hannah's wedding, and he left it all to me. Every acre. I want to be careful here, because I'm not a man who likes to brag, and I genuinely didn't understand what I had at first. I just knew Wendell had left me his land and a folder of papers, and I knew I needed a lawyer to make sense of it. The lawyer, a sharp older woman named Constance Okafor, who'd handled Wendell's affairs for 30 years, sat me down and explained it slow, like she could tell I needed it slow. The land was zoned commercial now. A development group had been trying to buy a parcel of it for 2 years to build a regional shopping center and distribution hub. The whole estate, between the land, the lease agreements Wendell had quietly signed with 3 logistics companies, and a portfolio he'd built besides, was worth a little over $14 million. It generated after taxes somewhere north of $900,000 a year. I'm a man who has clicked coupons his entire life. I had to put my head between my knees for a minute when she said the number. But here is the thing I did with it, and I think it's the thing that tells you who I am, better than any number could. I didn't change a single thing about my life. I kept my job. I kept the rented house on Delmar, though I finally bought it. I kept driving my old truck. I had spent 50-some years learning that money doesn't make a man, and I wasn't about to forget it because some came my way. I'd told exactly 2 people, my lawyer and Hannah, bless her, the same girl who works 12-hour shifts holding strangers' hands, had cried and said, "Dad, it doesn't change anything," and meant it. She'd never told Trevor. She'd certainly never told Prevert. She'd certainly never told Bianca. We'd agreed it was nobody's business, so when Bianca called me a janitor and a gutter rat in front of 210 people, she was insulting a man who could have bought her dead husband's dealerships out of pocket and not noticed the dent. And I want to be honest with you about something, because this is a story about pride too, not just hers but mine. The reason I'd never spent a dime of it loudly, the reason I still helped move tables at my own daughter's wedding, was that I had always believed a man should be respected for who he is, not what he has. I believed it Saturday morning. By Saturday night, I was a lot angrier about how wrong I'd let myself be. I didn't sleep much. Around 4 in the morning, my phone started buzzing and didn't stop. Hannah, 11 missed calls. A string of texts from Trevor that started apologetic and got strange, and then one from a number I didn't recognize that turned my stomach to ice. It was Hannah. She'd left the reception early too, it turned out, and gone back to the hotel, and she'd overheard something through the thin wall of the adjoining room where Trevor and his mother were talking, and she'd recorded it on her phone because some instinct told her to. She sent it to me at 4 in the morning with 3 words. "Dad, listen, now." I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and I listened to my new son-in-law and his mother on a crackling recording, and I learned what kind of family my daughter had just married into. Bianca's voice first. Once they're back from the honeymoon, you start working on her about the prenup amendment. Slowly. She's soft. She'll fold if you frame it as protecting her. Then Trevor. She already signed the standard one. The standard one's worthless if there's nothing to standard one. The standard one's worthless if there's nothing to standardize. I'm talking about the father. That old man's sitting on something, Trevor. I can feel it. Men like that always have a little nest egg. They're too proud to spend. House paid off, no debts, drives a truck older than you. Find out what he's got. When he goes and he's not young. It all comes to her, and what's hers is yours. Ma, he's a janitor. And your father was a used car salesman before he was anything. Don't be naive. You marry the daughter, you inherit the family. We just need to make sure the family's worth inheriting and that the money flows the right direction. If the old man's a liability, there are ways to handle liabilities. Power of attorney, conservatorship. Old people get confused. It's documented all the time. I had to stop the recording. I sat there in the dark a long while. I thought it was just cruelty. A nasty woman with a nasty mouth. It wasn't. It was a plan. And my daughter, and eventually me, were line items in it. The conservatorship line was the one that did it. She'd said it so casually. Old people get confused. It's documented all the time. The same trick people use to lock their own parents away and empty their accounts. She'd been measuring me for it the way you'd measure a man for a coffin. Hannah called again at 6. She was crying so hard I could barely make her out. "Dad, I heard everything. I can't. I married him yesterday." "God, Dad, what did I do?" "You didn't do anything," I told her. "You fell in love with someone who lied to you. That's on him, not you. Now listen to me. I need you to stop crying and do exactly what I say, and I promise you, by the end of this week, you are going to be free, and you are going to be all right. Do you trust me?" "I always trust me. I always trust you." "Good. First thing, don't let on you heard anything. Smile. Be sweet. Say you're tired from the wedding. Second thing, do not, under any circumstances, sign anything Trevor puts in front of you. Not a card, not a form, nothing. Third thing, you still have that recording? Yes. Send it to me again, and don't delete the original. Now go take a shower and pull yourself together, because we've got work to do, and we're going to do it right. Monday morning, I was sitting in Constance Okafor's office before she'd had her coffee. I played her the recording. She listened to the whole thing with her hands folded and her face very still, and when it ended, she took her glasses off and said, "Russell, in 30 years I have rarely been handed something this clean." She walked me through it. The marriage was barely 72 hours old. An annulment, given fraud and concealment of material intent, was very much on the table, and the recording, even if not all of it would be admissible the same way in every proceeding, was a cannon pointed at Trevor's entire position. More than that, Constance explained. The conservatorship talk and the explicit discussion of manipulating Hannah's signature and targeting my assets crossed lines that interested people beyond divorce court. There are statutes about conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of the elderly. There are statutes about fraud. Bianca had said the quiet part out loud on a recording the night of the wedding. But I'll be honest about what I wanted, because I've thought about it a lot since, and the comment sections of my own conscience went back and forth on it. The cleanest revenge would have been to simply set Hannah free and walk away. Live well, let them rot in their little world. There's an old saying about that being the best revenge, and there's truth in it. But I kept hearing that one line. There are ways to handle liabilities. She hadn't just insulted me. She'd planned, in cold detail, to have me declared incompetent and locked away so she could get at money she assumed I was too dumb to have. And she'd raised a son to help her do it to my daughter. I decided that living well was necessary, but not sufficient. Some people need to actually be stopped, or they just move on to the next family. So we did both. Tuesday, Constance filed for annulment on Hannah's behalf, citing fraud. Wednesday, a copy of the recording, with full documentation, went to a contact Constance had in the district attorney's office that handled elder financial abuse, along with a sworn statement from me. And then I made one phone call. I'll admit I enjoyed more than a man my age probably should. I called Bianca myself. She answered all sugar. "Russell, I was hoping you'd reach out. I'm afraid there was a terrible misunderstanding at the reception. I'd had too much wine, you know how." "Bianca," I said, "I'm going to talk and you're going to listen, because this is the only time we're ever going to speak." A pause. "Excuse me." "The land my Uncle Wendell left me," I said, "is worth a little over $14 million. It throws off close to $1 million a year. I've known for 2 years. I cleaned floors for 31 years because I wanted to, because I'm not ashamed of honest work, and because I learned a long time ago that what a person has and what a person is worth are two different things. You never learned that. I almost feel sorry for you." The silence on the line was the most satisfying sound of my life. "Now here's what's going to happen," I went on. "Hannah is filing to annul the marriage, and that conversation you had with your son Saturday night, the one about working her on a prenup and finding out what the old man's got, and conservatorships and handling liabilities, is currently sitting on the desk of a prosecutor who specializes in exactly the kind of thing you described. So you go ahead and lawyer up, Bianca. You're going to need a much better one than your country club friends can recommend." She started to say something. I think the word was "you wouldn't," and I just said, "I already did. Good night," and I hung up. And I sat in my paid-off little house on Delmar Avenue, and I felt my father in that charcoal suit hanging in the closet, and I felt Claudine, and I felt about as clear and clean as I've ever felt in my life. I'd like to tell you it all wrapped up in a week, like I promised Hannah, but justice moves slower than that. What did happen fast was the social part. Word travels in those country club circles even quicker than it traveled in mine. By the end of that week, the story going around wasn't, "Did you hear that janitor crashed his daughter's wedding?" It was, "Did you hear Bianca screamed at a man worth $14 million and he's pressing charges?" 2 of her friends stopped returning her calls. Trevor's regional sales manager, a decent man it turned out, started asking pointed questions when the annulment paperwork crossed paths with someone who knew someone. The annulment went through clean, given what we had. Hannah was unmarried again within 2 months, and though she carried it hard for a while, she's tender-hearted, my girl. and being lied to by someone you love cuts deep no matter how it ends. She came out the other side. The recording did its work with the district attorney too. Bianca was charged. Conspiracy and attempted financial exploitation don't sound as dramatic as the made-for-TV version, but I sat in that courtroom and watched a woman who'd called me gutter trash explain herself to a judge, and I'll tell you, the gutter was not on my side of the room that day. She took a plea in the end. Trevor cooperated against his mother to save his own skin, which tells you the last thing you need to know about that family. But none of that is really the point of why I'm telling you this. About a year after all of it, I finally did something with Wendell's money besides let it sit. Hannah and I started a fund. It pays the legal fees for elderly folks who are being maneuvered out of their homes and their savings by family members and con artists. The exact thing Bianca planned to do to me. The conservatorship trap, the forged power of attorney, the moms getting confused routine. There's a whole industry of it preying on people who worked their whole lives, and most of them never had a Hannah recording through a hotel wall or a Constance Okafor on their side. So we became that, for as many of them as we can. We named it after my uncle, the Wendell Hartley Fund. He'd have hated the attention. He'd have loved the work. Hannah's doing fine now, better than fine. She met a man 2 years ago, a paramedic, the kind of person who runs toward the thing everyone else runs from. And last spring, I walked her down an aisle again. Smaller, 40 people, in my backyard on Del Mar, under a tent. I wore the charcoal suit. There was no cake table for anyone to insult, just a sheet cake. Hannah and I made ourselves the night before. Flour all over the kitchen, laughing the way her mother and I used to laugh. I gave a toast. I'm not much for speeches, but I said one thing I'd been thinking about for a while, and I'll leave you with it the same way I left it with them. I said that for most of my life I believed a man should be judged by what's in his heart and not what's in his bank account, and that I'd been so committed to proving it that I'd let people treat me like dirt to make the point. And I'd learned, late, that there's no contradiction between knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone make you small. You can keep your hands rough, and your truck old and your house humble. And you can still, when somebody comes for the people you love, stand up straight and let them find out exactly who they're dealing with. My hands are still rough. I still get the half-second handshake from people who think they can read a man by his calluses. I don't mind it anymore. I know what these hands built. They held my wife while she was dying. They raised the best woman I know. They moved a table at a wedding because that's what good people do when there's work to be done. Let them laugh. They don't know whose hands those are, but they find out. They always find out. For a long time after that wedding, I kept turning one question over in my head. How did a woman like Bianca end up so certain she could measure a man's whole worth by the scars on his hands? And the answer I keep landing on is simpler than I expected. She never had to be honest a day in her life, so she stopped believing honesty meant anything. That's the thing about cruelty like hers. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's built, choice by choice, the same way Wendell built that land. Acre by acre. You become what you practice. She practiced contempt for 30 years and called it taste, and when the bill came due, she couldn't understand why nobody would cover it for her. What saved my daughter wasn't luck. And I want to be clear about that, because I don't want anybody watching this to think you just have to wait for justice to fall out of the sky. Hannah saved herself the moment she had the presence of mind to hold up that phone and hit record through a hotel wall at 4 a.m, heartbroken and shaking. That's not luck. That's a clear head in the worst moment of your life. I taught her a lot of things, but I didn't teach her that. She found it in herself. And here's what I'd want my own grandkids to take from all of this. Be a person of your word, even when nobody's clapping for it. Even when being decent makes you look small to people who don't matter. That decency is not weakness. It's the foundation everything else stands on. But decency alone wasn't enough, was it? If I'd only been kind, Bianca would have rolled right over me and my girl both. You also have to think. You have to see the trap before you're standing in it. Keep your records, know who's really on your side, and move carefully when it counts instead of just exploding. And then there's the last thing, the hardest one. You have to be able to take a blow and stay standing. 31 years of night shifts taught me that. Burying my wife taught me that. When that room full of strangers laughed at me, the only reason I could walk out with my head up instead of crumbling was that I'd already survived worse and kept going. Those three things together are what carried us through, not the $14 million. The money just made the ending tidy. The character is what made the ending possible. I'm an old man now. My hands still look like what they are. But I sleep fine at night, and Bianca, wherever she is, has to wake up every morning as herself. That's a punishment no court ever handed down, and it's the only one that really sticks. Be the kind of person you'd be proud to wake up as. Everything else sorts itself out from there.